the poles holding up the sign and the edges of the sign are really rectangular in the Zapruder film, as you've seen it before today. The ones that don't have pincushion distortion. They're pretty well rectangular. It's a nice, beautiful sign. In fact, it shouldn't be so beautiful because Zapruder's not looking at it head on. It's facing on the street. It's pointing to the motorists, not pointing to Zapruder, hopefully. And all of the signs are on about that angle. We've got other photographs which show the angle it's on. But still, the sign, beautiful, rectangular sign. When you correct the pincushion distortion, the width becomes correct, which basically means it sort of points to the right background objects roughly correctly. But the poles do all sorts of weird things. It should be the exact opposite. In the film, it should be doing weird things, and when you correct it, it should turn into a real sign. So I had a second part to this investigation, that this sort of behaviour was impossible. I want to show you this little pincushion barrel thing again. Take a look at these two light poles, which are pretty well perfectly vertical in Jack's photo, close enough to vertical. When you pincushion it, they should go out towards the corners, like everything else. It's like a big rubber sheet. You pull the corners out, and these, now let's go back. This should bend a little bit away from the, it should go like that. Should bend like that. Because it's like it's on a big rubber sheet with everything else that's real, and when you correct it, it should go back to being the real pole or the real sign. When you correct it, of course, you're bending it in the other way. Frame 193, which has, and I'm looking at this side of the sign. Okay, this pole. You notice how it's pretty rectangular, you've got to say. To me, it looks very rectangular, that sign. It's not sort of bent, it's not wobbly, it doesn't look like the Bothan photograph where it's just about having trouble standing up. That's a very beautiful rounded sign. Of course, these panels down the side, we've never figured out what these panels are. Why there's a strip of light material there and a light material there when it's just a big piece of plyboard. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Here's frame 228, so he's panned now across, the limo's coming out, and we've got this piece of fiction evolving back here. And the sign is now just about into the sprocket hole region where you'd expect a fair amount of pincushion pulling it this way. And it's still pretty vertical. Of course, you've got to make sure you get the backgrounds right before you can say whether it's still vertical or not. But it still doesn't seem to be, it should be twisted out of shape. A right angle should be twisted. Okay, when you do a pincushion, if you look at the edge of the pincushion frame, it comes a little point. So a right angled corner actually becomes an acute angle, a smaller than 90-degree angle, which you'd expect for the corner of the sign should be doing opposite things. And these two frames. So the first step, of course, for the two frames was to get rid of the pincushion. That's not the frame, that's just the little video clip from before. And then just to make sure, which is a step I didn't do originally, I corrected the perspective so that it acted as if the camera was pointing at the exact same position for both frames. Right? And this is just to remind you that we can do that. And this is to remind you we can do the pincushion distortion. And so what you should have are two frames in which the camera may as well have been glued to a tripod pointing in the same direction. Okay? The image should look the same. So people will move, and the limo will move, and the motorcycles will move, and people might even wave. Of course, none of them wave. But if they were waving, you would see them waving. But the camera is pointing in exactly the same direction. So everything should line up perfectly. And everything that's fixed, that's not moving like limousines and people, should be identical. They should stay in the same place. And so they're the two bits of frame, and you should be able to overlay them perfectly. So you notice here you've got the holes in the wall, which the bushes are quite prickly, aren't they? We measured all those holes just the other day, and got prickled, whatever they've got now, holly, isn't it, or something? The holes in the wall, the top of the wall, the edge of the wall, and these bushes. Do you see that little highlight on the bush, whatever that bush is called, that reddish sort of bush? Okay, I'll believe you. I'll just call it the red bush. I'm not a botanist. Don't worry about the shadow of the tree, because the tree sways in the breeze a little bit, and this is like a second later, 2 seconds later. But you can really pick any point that's fixed. Now you've got to worry there's some ghost image here. In fact, that's the Texas Highway sign down here in the for the Stemmons Freeway sign. But apart from the things that are coming through as ghost image, you can try and line up any of those features, this bush, or this corner, okay? And just make sure, even the shadow, make sure that they're properly rotated and overlaid. So then you can look at the sign. Now, it's flopping around. It's not just the pole of the sign, it's the edge of the sign, but not the top of the sign. Okay, so this is where the sign should be stationary. It should be a real sign in this frame, not in the raw frame as you have on the Zapruder film. To make that a bit clearer, here's a blue line going down through these 2 holes in the wall. Here's a blue line going through that corner of the wall where it turns around the corner, the edge of the wall, I guess. And here's a red line that's just roughly above the top of the sign, just as a horizontal reference. And these orangey yellow lines, which colour are they? Orange or yellow? I can't tell, I'm colourblind. They follow the pole and just to the right of the right edge of the sign, which in the first one the limo's behind it. And if the sign was just moving left and right, there'd be no problem, because if the sign was here and the background was over there, if you close one eye, or you can put your finger up in front of your head, if you move your head, your finger moves sideways, right? You move that way, your finger moves the other way, up and down, which is called the parallax effect. You can make things move left and right and up and down. You can't make them tilt just by moving your head. You can try it at home for as many hours as you like. You can't make the angle change by moving your head. Now, so it can move left and right because Zapruder was filming, and he's apparently a real person on a real pedestal filming. Could have moved his camera because he's got to turn around and not bump Sitzman off the pedestal and so on. And that's quite possible. You can't have this angle. You can't make this angle wrong. And in fact, when you go back and look at the original frames, you realise that it was aligned perfectly with the background in the raw frames. The point about this is, this now points over here in this frame, and it points over there for that frame. But before you take the pincushion distortion out, if you just laid a ruler against them, they would point to the same position on the frame. Okay? Because pincushion distortion correction has bent vertical lines like that. So whoever created the film, or put the Stemmons sign over the top for whatever purpose, put it in the film without realising that there was this pincushion distortion that would have to be introduced or accounted for down the track. Okay. And it really is it really is, to my mind, the strongest evidence that the film was at least altered, that this sign was put over the top of whatever was there, presumably the sign as it originally was. And people have speculated about this for many years.
The so-called backyard photos were a crude attempt to frame Oswald. I will not show all the dozens of proof of fabrication, which I've already shown in my video fake. I will just list a few, such as we have the same Oswald face on another body. The chin is square, not pointed. The fingers are chopped off. The shadows are wrong. The left arm is too short. The rifle is the wrong length. The body is out of balance. The newspapers are the wrong size. The rifle swivels are in the wrong place, and many, many more. These backyard photos are definite fabrications. So why would the Zapruder film be exempt from alteration?
Question is, why wasn't it fixed? And here's my what I thought was fairly impressive. This issue, dated November 29, Josiah Thompson's clincher was that it was published, it was actually printed on Saturday night. The problem he had with it being printed on Saturday night is there's actually a photo in here of Ruby shooting Oswald, which would have been an amazing prediction if... but I'll admit that it was probably all printed by Sunday, because people were getting it by Tuesday morning and it was being distributed on Monday. So I'll accept that it was probably published, probably printed on the first weekend. And so if David excuses me for manhandling his copy here, these three apparently innocent frames here locked it in. There they are, scanned and reproduced over there. The mistake was it shows both sides of the sign. And in fact there's two versions here of the left-hand side of the sign. It's basically locked in. The fact that the sign looked like this and it was so sort of square, and here again, already in those first couple of days, you have this weird panel, light panel on the side of the sign, which has no physical explanation. You can't, as Jack has pointed out many times, you can't splice together those pieces of plyboard without a metal bracket. In fact, the reason I was taking photographs of the sign that's there now down at Fort Worth Turnpike sign is because it has a lot of these metal brackets on the back that's splicing pieces of wood together when we notice the little rain sensor up on the corner. So that's locked in. That's why it wasn't fixed. That's why it wasn't changed. Once you've locked something in, once you've distributed millions of copies of Life magazine, that's it. What appears in here is basically it. Anything in here can't be changed, so you better make sure what is in here is correct. And I hate to be the person that made that mistake.